Hey, welcome back this week to another episode of Crane Lake Stories. We've been just so excited about hearing stories from near and far, and young visitors and older visitors and longtime, lifetime residents and first-time visitors. Crane Lake Stories has really evolved into a really fun project personally for me to do these interviews. But this week, we're really excited to have Brenda King along with us, who has quite a history with the Crane Lake area through her family and through generations. But 2 years ago, she finally settled into, I don't know if it's her dream job, but it seems like it would be. And she is the pastor at the Crane Lake Chapel and the Kabetogama Chapel. So Brenda, thanks for coming on and joining us today.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here and get to share this wonderful space.
It is, and a wonderful place in the world. And that's, kind of been the thing with the common theme, even with people who have been first-time visitors that we've talked to either on camera or just in person. There's something magical and something that pulls people into this place in the world that is just so attractive and kind of magical. And you will have a lot of stories and experience to share with us, I'm sure. Tell us just a little bit about what your family's history is. I know that it goes back almost 100 years to your grandfather and great uncles and people coming up to hunt, but tell us a little bit about what your history looks like.
Well, in 1928, my uncle was going to Hamline University and he heard about this place called Crane Lake and that it had good deer hunting. And so that was the year that the railroad was pulled out. And in 29, they were using the railroad bed as a road. And my grandfather and my uncles went up hunting. And they stayed at Nelson's Resort. And from then on, from then until into the 80s, they went hunting in that area or in Superior National Forest. And so that began the family going up. And my dad wasn't old enough to go that year, but wasn't too many years before he got to go too. In the 1930s, there was a log cabin at what's now the Makuta campgrounds, and they leased that for several years to hunt out of. My dad told the story that one year it got so cold that sent the rest of the family home because they had to get back to work. My Uncle Ford and Uncle Billy and Grandpa, and my dad stayed with a sure-tail relative up at that log cabin, and they had to get 2 more deer. They did it Thursday. He knew his folks were coming back up on Saturday. Thursday, he walked across Crane Lake to see how the ice was, had hauled all the deer down to Northwest Bay and hung them up down there. Got down to Congdon's for a cup of coffee, and there were some guys there, and they said, "Hey, you've got those deer down on Northwest Portage. I want that doe. I'll pay you for it." That was Grandpa's deer. So he thought about whether he should sell his dad's deer or not. But he sold it because the guy said he was going to take it anyhow, so might as well get the money for it. This was the 30s. Naturally, we'll take money. And went back up and told the guy that was still up there with him they had to go out and get another deer, and they did. Saturday morning, they started across Crane Lake with the old wooden boat full of deer, pulling it because it was iced over. And about halfway across, they met up with his brothers and his dad, and Grandpa walked around the boat several times and said, "Where's my doe?" And the other guy, Grandpa Sonnenberg, who was this relative, said, "It grew horns." And Grandpa was okay with it, especially when he got the money for it.
Oh, that's great.
And so they just kept going. In the 40s, they built, Uncle Billy bought some property right there by the Makuta Portage on the Sandpoint side and built the old cabin. I've seen the pictures when it was the old cabin. I remember them calling it the bunkhouse by the time I could go up there. But they built a cabin and the family went fishing and hunting. And even Grandma, they said they got her up a couple times. she'd only go across the lake and stay. She would not get back in the boat until it was time to go home. But
Wow.
grandma even came up. I say that grandma was 80 when I was born. So she was probably in her 60s when she was going up. And that was as far as they could get her.
Wow. Was all
But
of the family coming from the Twin Cities? Is that kind of where they were based out of?
just to the north of the cities,
Okay.
Princeton area,
Yep.
Anoka area. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where they all were. And so it was a long trip when you think about
No kidding.
1929
No
to
kidding.
come up from a farm. I don't
Yeah.
know how they did it.
Wow.
And I'm not sure, but probably in the 50s, they built the new cabin.
Okay.
And my aunt and uncle lived up there pretty much the first week of the month at Federal Cartridge in Anoka, but otherwise they were up there all the time.
Yeah.
That cabin is now the park ranger's cabin at the Makuta Portage.
Okay.
So in 1961, my parents decided they needed a cabin up there. And first time we ever left with a babysitter overnight as they went up to find that lot. And at deer hunting that year, the guys came up, started cutting the place for the cabin, built a shack. And in 1962, we went up as a family for Memorial Day, built the outhouse, put in the dock, continued to clear the lot. And we all helped. I'm the oldest of three, so
Okay.
we were 5, 4, and 2 helping.
Wow. And obviously that's probably one of your first personal memories then of coming up, and obviously very
Yeah.
indelible in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I remember going across in that boat, and both of my sisters fell asleep on the 10-mile boat ride. And so I'm the one left carrying the stuff. And this is a couple docks down. Somebody had said we could use their dock, and asking my dad partway to this, across these 4 lots, are you sure you're not lost? I mean, we had been in the car since midnight, no 35W going up.
Right.
So it was a slow trip up. And then across the lake, you sure you're not lost? I asked him that very clearly. I remember he says, no, we're almost there, as we were walking it. And got there and found this shack that the guys had built for deer hunting, and continued to work, came up for 4th of July for 16 days. Dad stopped at the fire ranger to say, hey, we need a burning permit because we're going to keep burning brush to clear the lot. And the guy told him that the bear had broke into the shack.
Oh, wow.
So my dad had to think of a good story to tell. The bear, there were 2 little windows in the shack. Bear broke both of them and pulled off a 4x8 sheet of the shack.
Yep.
And broke in, stepped on the table. So my dad had to make it so we'd all think it was safe in there. It worked. Mom wasn't very happy with the bear. It had dragged out our sleeping bags and they were wet when we got there. But we spent 16 days in that shack. The second day, the barge brought up all the lumber for the cabin.
Okay.
Dad had ordered everything. It was the same design as my aunt and uncle's cabin down on the Makuta Portage, but a mirror image of it. And so he started building, and if he needed 2x4s, he'd tell my mom how many to bring from the shoreline up to the cabin. And if it was a number of them, then I got to help because I was 5 to haul those logs, those pieces. Well, she could carry 1 or 2 2x4s by herself, but if I'd help, then we could do 3 to 4 together. And so then my 4-year-old sister's having to watch the 2-year-old, and 2-year-old only fell in the lake once during that week. And about the time, and that was about the time my uncle was trying to bring the boat in, because Uncle Ford and another friend had brought the stove and refrigerator at that point. And you got to get things lined up correctly. By the end of 16 days, my dad had the roof on, the shingles on, and he had stuffed all the eaves with insulation so no animals or bugs could get in.
Sure.
I think there were a couple windows at that point. And so when we came up in August, we brought up the big windows, and I don't think the porch windows got put in till the next year, but just kept working on it.
Wow.
Went up for deer hunting. He brought sheetrock so the guys could help him sheetrock at night. So it was a family cabin,
Yeah.
and we used it continuously. And then in the late 60s, my dad built a snowmobile. It was a heavy bugger, and 4 of us could ride on it. So, it was a big thing. And he also had bought a small Skidoo was a racing Skidoo with a burnt out engine. So he put a new engine in it, and we started going up in the winter. There was no insulation on the floor of that cabin. That wasn't what they built it for to start with.
Right.
And so we started going up every year, December 26th for the rest of Christmas vacation. My dad wasn't too concerned if we missed a day or two of school. So, it's okay.
Yeah.
We all got good enough grades. And
so that cabin, that was obviously through your whole childhood. Is that cabin still standing?
No, it was taken by the Park Service.
Okay.
So, no, we used it for midwinter recess. Our school had the first week of February off because it was supposed to be the coldest of the winter. Once they started doing it, wasn't. But they could turn off the heat in the school or turn it down and thought they'd save energy. So we were up there at least 2 weeks every winter, besides summer, a lot of summertime.
Yeah. So through your childhood into adulthood, at some point, kind of the cabin disappeared, but you continued this affinity and this visiting to Crane Lake all the way through adulthood?
Yes. Family continues to go up. We've had family reunions up there. Oh my goodness, you don't want to be around for that. There's 17 of us of my Uncle Billy's family and our family. So yeah, the family's been going up. Last summer, one of my cousins went up he's the 4th generation, and his son barely remembers the last time they went up. And he was only 3 or 4 years old, and he's now 17. So the family continues to go up.
Right. And you said 4 generations.
5 generations now have been yeah.
Wow.
So I think Crane Lake is very much, I asked on yesterday at church, to introduce yourselves and tell where you're staying, how long you've been coming. And it's such a generational place. I mean, almost everybody was saying, well, we're the 3rd or we're the 4th generation up here.
Wow.
There were the new folks, but a lot of generational.
Yeah.
They've been there for a long time in that area.
So we had such a great conversation with Pastor Brenda King that went on and on with all of these great stories, and we decided to split this into 2 episodes. So this is going to be the end of this episode, but be sure and join us next time as we pick up where we left off with Pastor King, talking about some of the new upcoming things that are happening in the Crane Lake area currently.